Hey, what's going on, everybody? It has been a long time coming, but we have finally have a new Mosher's mailbag out. I'd say between the last one I did a couple weeks ago and now, I've picked up several new subscribers. So I want to say thank you to everybody who has become a subscriber to my website. A lot of news over the past 2 weeks, and if you're reading my content, and in particular, if you're also listening to my podcast that I do with Adam Kaplan called the Inside the Birds podcast, which is available on iTunes and all the other podcast houses under the Go Birds network. You may have to do a search on Go Birds. If you're listening to that podcast, if you're reading my content, you'll not have been surprised by a lot of the moves that the Eagles have made. I've either foreshadowed to some of them, I've broken some news on some of them, and obviously a lot's gone on. So I've been trying to keep everybody up to date as much as possible. I do this mailbag. I enjoy doing it, and I will keep doing it as long as I keep getting questions. So feel free to use the Patreon message vehicle there to ask me any question at any time, and I will try to continuously do this, if not every week, every 2 weeks, depending on how fast I get the questions or how often I do. What I will do is send out every Monday or Tuesday, I'll send out an email that can be easily replied to, and you can ask me your questions through that. Big shout out to Frank G. I know he's been missing these mailbags, so he's part of the reason I'm able to do one now. He had a few questions, got a couple others. So I'm going to go right at the questions. So Frank asks a question that I get every once in a while, and I never really put much thought into it, but it's an interesting question. And his first question was, when players get their signing bonuses, which is guaranteed money that they get up front, do they get it in the form of a cash, a check, direct deposit? How do they get their money? Reached out to an agent to ask him the question, and the response I got was direct deposit. So I'm sure if they wanted an upfront check, they might be able to get it. But I think most cases, players just and their agents really take care of the paperwork to have that big sum of money go straight into their bank accounts to start collecting, whatever interest they get on it. So yeah, that is the case. The direct deposit is the answer to that. Second question, and it's a good one. It regards the Eagles' backup quarterback situation and if they're really going to bring in anybody to compete with Nate Sudfeld. You heard some interesting comments from Doug Peterson at the Combine, and he said that he would like Nate Sudfeld to compete for the number 2 job, not have it handed to him. I think they really like Nate Sudfeld. They gave him a second-round tender. I think they expect him to win the backup job, but this team has prioritized backup quarterback for a while. They've prioritized experience. And I'm sure, and I know that they've been looking for a veteran to bring in. Now, a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick would have been perfect. The issue that the Eagles confront right now is backup quarterback has become prioritized for a lot of teams. So they have to find a veteran backup who has to be okay with the idea that he may come to the Eagles and not be the backup. He may lose out and wind up becoming the number 3, or, maybe they find a developmental young guy later in the draft, and this guy – who they would bring in maybe out on the streets. So they're not going to really have their, Tyrod Taylor went to the Chargers and Blake Bortles went to the Rams. Those guys are automatically the backups. They're in a good situation. They're going to be on the team. The Eagles are trying to toe that line between trying to find a veteran out there, but also, knowing that this guy may not beat out Nate Sudfeld for the number 2 spot. So you can look at the names of some of the backups out there and say, hey, this guy did this, or why didn't they go out after Bortles, or why didn't they try to lure away Frank Fitzpatrick, Ryan Fitzpatrick. But the reality is that they're probably not going to bring in someone with that kind of name. I would have to think that they'll be looking at someone with some kind of West Coast offense experience, maybe who's played either for Andy or for Doug or Matt Nagy, something along that, someone who runs a similar offense somewhere. A lot of names don't jump out to me now, but that's the difficulty that they present. And that's probably why if they do sign a veteran, it's not going to make the earth move for any Eagles fan. Another question. Carson Wentz, will he get the extension this offseason? I saw a report today that said the Eagles have about $21 million in cap room. Isn't that amazing? $21 million for a team that was tight against the cap going into the offseason. I don't think the Eagles are going to be using that $21 million on splurging on any more free agents. There's really none left that are that you would want to pour a lot of money into. Clearly, the Eagles' plan is over the last few years is not to pour money into free agency. They are playing the compensatory 6-pick system that I've written about a lot. So that money is there to give Carson Wentz an extension if both sides can agree. I'm sure they're talking about it. I would say it's probably it could happen. I don't know if it's likely or unlikely. I think a lot of things factor in. Carson has to agree. I think the health for his last 2 years may factor into how much they're willing to offer him right now. I think it would be a good idea for the Eagles to get the extension done now, because the closer Carson gets to free agency, or the more the extensions that are signed for quarterbacks between now and this time next year, it just inflates the number. So I think it would be great for the Eagles to try to get him under wraps this year. I just don't know if it's going to happen, but clearly now they have the money to do it. If not, they have enough money to pay their rookies, which you need about you would like to have about 10 million anyway. Rookies cost you about 6 to 8 million, but they also have financial flexibility to, at the deadline, maybe go in and trade for a player. In the past there was Jay Ajayi. He was on a rookie deal. It wasn't that much money. Last year it was Golden Tate, which was more significant money that they had to bring in, even just for half the year. It enables them to again do that this coming season if they want to go that route. But it also allows them to take any extra money they have and carry it over as extra cap space in 2020. So kind of back to Howie's old ways of having room underneath the cap to make whatever moves he wants to make. Some have asked, and this parlays into the next question, about some of these moves that he's made that are with the cap in mind, but also with winning in mind. Is the team too old? I mean, bringing back Vinny Curry, the decision to bring back Jason Peters, Chris Long right now is on the team. His future is a little bit skeptical. He's kind of wondering what's going to happen. He still wants to play, and he's wondering with this new defensive line if he's going to be on the field as much as he was. Obviously, they signed a third safety, Andrew Sendejo. I talked about the importance of having that number 3 safety, that Corey Graham role. He's a little bit older. He's, I think, 29. Or no, he's 30, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, the team does have a lot of guys who are older than 29 or in their 30s, and in Jason Peters' case, late 30s. But they also have a decent number of young players, right? And the biggest thing to me is that most of the veterans that they brought in, like Deshaun Jackson, most of the Vinny, most of the guys who they have in that 29 to 31 year range are all on short-term deals. It's not unlike a couple of years ago when they went and got Chris Long and they went and got LeGarrette Blount and they got Corey Graham off the street, who in 2017 was enormous in that third safety role for them. I mean, played a really big role. All of them were on 1 or 2 year deals. They're not strangling your cap. You're not committed to them for 5 more years when they're really, like the Nnamdi Asomugha deal where you sign a guy who's older for all those years and all that money and you're stuck with it. All these contracts are short term, and the true building of the Philadelphia Eagles as we go into the future is going to happen this year and next year. They have 6 or 7 draft picks this year, including 3 in the top 60, right? And then next year, with all they should get about 4 comp picks along with their normal picks, along with the pick that they got from the Patriots in exchange for Michael Bennett. They could have between 10 and 13 picks next year. So the next 2 years, this is it. This is what it's going to. This is the building and rebuilding of the Philadelphia Eagles over the next 2 years, using these draft picks, and that's why they've been selective in free agency to be able to stockpile these compensatory picks. So keep close attention. Howie's got a lot of picks, which enables him to A, pick a lot of players, and B, it enables him to be aggressive in the draft. If he wants to take those 2 second-round picks this year, package them, move up in the second round for either a premier running back or a premier pass rusher or another position, safety, he could do that. If he wants to take his first-round pick and one of those 2 second-round picks or a third-round pick just to move up maybe a spot or 2 in the first round to get a guy, he can do that. More picks equals the ability to replenish your team with young talent and also maneuverability in the draft, which is something Howie Roseman really likes. So I do think that the team in general, it's fair to say it's older than you would like, but the talent that they brought in that has age, or talent that they kept that has age, like Jason Peters and Chris Long, they play important parts, and they should figure in. Brandon Graham should figure in prominently to this season, but there's also young guys at each level, whether it's Derek Barnett, Jordan Mailata, Matt Pryor is going to be a backup guard and maybe have to start if Brandon Brooks isn't ready. They're probably going to pick up a safety in the draft this year. They're going to have young guys at the position to be able to group. But it is the big concern I have, I guess, with a guy like, say, Deshaun, who's a little bit older and who has had hamstring injuries, is this team did not, for whatever reason, the medical staff did not deal well with soft tissue injuries throughout last year in both the treatment and rehab process. So you do get a little concerned about guys if they've had injuries like Jason Peters, like Deshaun Jackson, how well the medical staff will be able to treat and get them ready to play on game day. Let's move on. Let's say Dave P has a couple of questions, or just one question. It's an interesting one. He's kind of a forgotten person. Dave P asks about Joel Ostman, a defensive end who was an undrafted rookie last year, who spent the year on the practice squad, but was one of those guys who had a very impressive preseason and training camp last year. He plays defensive end, and Dave asks, what's his role going into this year? Well, first, he's 6'3", 259 pounds. So he's a little short and he's a little light for what you see right now out of the Eagles on the D-line, which is guys 6'5", 6'6", 240, 250, 260. What did I say? He's 259. Yeah, Barnett's a little light, but the other guys are a little bit more stout. He's very fast off the edge. Great motor. That's what they really liked about him. They thought him as a speed / edge rusher in a one-gap scheme, in a quarterback attacking scheme that Jim Schwartz runs is very important. You may have heard or read that he was in the practice squad last year. He would wear the penny for the team's best pass rusher. So when they were trying to face the Bears in the playoffs, Joel Ostman wore the Khalil Mack, was it 59, 54 jersey, and acted and moved around and did all the things that Khalil Mack would do. So they think highly of him, but he does face a numbers game. Usually you're going to keep, 4 or 5 defensive ends. Right now you've got Brandon Graham, you have Derek Barnett, you have Vinny Curry, you probably will have Chris Long, you do have Josh Sweat. So that's 5 right there. Even if Chris Long doesn't stay, that's 4, and they're probably going to draft a defensive end tackle somewhere in the draft because it's a very good draft for defensive linemen. So he will go into camp, Joel Ostman, with the opportunity to compete for a spot. But I think his best chance to make the team is if Chris Long's not here and if Josh Sweat does not, make a huge improvement in year 2, or maybe he's still injured. He is coming off of a season-ending injury. He's got very thin lower legs. Todd Pinkston like lower legs for a defensive end. And so that's always, to me, going to be a concern for him with the injury. So there's a shot he could make it as a special teams player, bottom roster defensive end who's going to probably be inactive most days on game day. But in general, I would say he's probably earmarked to do another year on the practice squad and then really try to compete for a job in 2020. That's all I've got. Those are the questions. Hope everybody has a great weekend and settles into March Madness, and we'll see how well Villanova can do. And everybody, enjoy the weekend. I will try to do this again in a week or 2. Again, if you have a question, send it to me through the Patreon message vehicle. And the more I get, the more of these that I can do. Everybody have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.